Good morning, good day, and good evening, and Happy New Year. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all races, ages, genders, sexual orientations, religions, etc. Today I'm going to be talking about someone that many may not know, though that is my preferred topic of discussion. He may not be as well known because of the negative impact he made in the world, or because what he did was not as notorious as others who committed similar acts as he did. One thing he did do was inspire an individual. An individual that you and I may have heard of and grew up with. You may have heard of him because his name is... Yep. The man, the Hall of Famer, the legend, Stone Cold Steve Austin. He, or rather Steve Austin's wrestling character, was based on the main topic of discussion. He is a man of violence, turmoil, anger, and savagery. I'm talking, of course, about Richard Kuklinski. One may ask, who is Richard Kuklinski? And how did he inspire one of the greatest wrestlers of all time? Well... Richard Leonard Kuklinski was born on the 11th of April, 1935, to Stanley Kuklinski and Anna Cecilia McNally, being the second-born child of four. While Anna was a devout Catholic, the same could not be said about Stanley, as he was a raging alcoholic who would beat his son, Richard, and his siblings on a regular basis. The beatings did not stop at his children, as Stanley would also beat his wife. Stanley was also known to leave his family for a period of time, only to return in an alcoholic rage and continue his beatings, specifically towards Richard. In 1940, when Richard was only 5 years old, he witnessed the death of his older brother, Florian Kuklinski. His passing was due to his father's unrelenting, intoxicated beating to the back of his head. Florian died at the age of 7. Stanley coerced Anna into lying to law enforcement officials about the cause of Florian's death by saying he had fallen down a flight of steps. Richard would receive further beatings from his mother following his father leaving the family. As a devout, and what some may consider deranged, Catholic, she believed that stern discipline should be accompanied by a strict religious upbringing. Richard would be raised in the Roman Catholic Church and served as an altar boy. This would not last long, as he would reject Catholicism. As if Richard's life was not difficult enough with abusive parents, he faced further difficulty in life as a victim of bullying from kids in his neighborhood due to his small size. With the turmoil happening at home, in the neighborhood, and his internal feelings, Richard found solace in the most unusual manner: torturing and killing stray cats and dogs. In 1948, at the age of 13, Kuklinski would commit his first murder. The victim was Charlie Lane, the leader of a small gang of teenagers known as the Project Boys. Lane was one of many bullies of Kuklinski. He would beat Lane to death using a thick wooden dowel. Though he did not want to kill Lane, the beating was too severe. Kuklinski then dumped Lane's body off a bridge in South Jersey after removing his teeth and chopping off his fingertips with a hatchet in the Pine Barrens in order to prevent identification of the body. To this day, Lane's body was never found. This violent incident led to Kuklinski's belief that it was better to give than to receive. Kuklinski would search for the other Project Boy members. When he found them, he used a metal pole he got from a trash can and beat them nearly to death. He would later drop out of the 8th grade and embark on a deeper downward spiral. By the time he was 19 years old, he had already killed 4 men. Kuklinski would meet his first wife, Linda, when he was 16 and she was 25. Despite Kuklinski committing criminal acts and Linda being the subject of his abuse, similar to what his father did to him and his mother, the two would marry. This decision came from the news that she was pregnant. they would have 2 sons together named Richard Jr. and David. In 1961, while still committing heinous crimes, Kuklinski would meet Barbara Pedrici, the daughter of an Italian-American Catholic family who was 18 years old at the time. The two were working at a trucking company where Barbara worked as a secretary. Despite having an uneasy relationship, and even that's putting it lightly, Kuklinski and Linda would divorce, and in September the same year, he married Pedrici and had 3 children, daughters Merrick and Kristen, and son Dwayne. While living in Dumont, New Jersey with his family, he convinced his neighbors that he was a successful businessman. Though Barbara was suspicious of what he really did for a living due to the amount of money he obtained and odd nightly behavior, she did not question him out of fear of his fits of rage. It was through his criminal activity that he kept his family in a luxurious lifestyle. In the 1950s, Kuklinski, who grew up to be a 6'5" and nearly 300-pound adult, worked at a Manhattan film lab where he accessed master copies of popular Disney and adult films. He made bootleg copies of them to sell as a regular source of income. He was also involved in other criminal activities such as robbery and theft. Through selling adult films, Kuklinski would encounter Roy DeMeo, who was part of the Italian-American Mafia criminals, the Gambino crime family. It was also through his association with the Gambino family that Kuklinski would become an enforcer and committed several more murders of men he met through trafficking adult films and drugs. He would also be the leader of a burglary group. Kuklinski would maintain the reputation of a hardened enforcer for numerous crime families. Throughout the 1960s and into the 1980s, Kuklinski led a double life as a loving but volatile husband and a criminal enforcer. Some of his notable killings include Robert Pronge, who served as a mentor and taught Kuklinski the ways of using cyanide and other ways to kill people. Pronge was killed on the 10th of August, 1984, after he made a threat to Kuklinski's family. George Maliband. He was killed during a meeting to sell him tapes on the 30th of January, 1980. His body was placed in a 55-gallon drum and left it near a chemical plant in Jersey City. Paul Hoffman, a pharmacist who met Kuklinski with $25,000 to buy prescription drugs from him. Hoffman was beat to death with a tire iron. His body was stuffed in a 55-gallon drum, and it was left outside a motel in Little Ferry. After some time, Kuklinski noticed the drum went missing, and Hoffman's remains were never recovered. Lastly, though not conclusive, Jimmy Hoffa. It was claimed by Kuklinski that Hoffa was captured by a 4-man kidnap team that he was a part of in Detroit, Michigan. While they were in the car, Kuklinski claimed to have stabbed Hoffa with a large hunting knife and drove Hoffa's corpse from Detroit to a New Jersey junkyard. It was placed in a drum, set on fire, and then buried in the junkyard. Fear arose that an accomplice might snitch, so the drum was dug up, placed in the trunk of a car, compacted into a cube, and sold to Japan as scrap metal along with hundreds of other compacted cars. His claims of this murder were met with heavy skepticism. Through multiple crimes and gaining further recognition as a hitman, Kuklinski would become precise in how he disposed of bodies. One method he used was how he gained his infamous nickname, the Iceman. Luis Mazgay, whose body was discovered in September 1983, was another victim of Kuklinski. After his murder, Mazgay's body was stored in a freezer, then disposed of near a town park near Clausland Mountain Road in Orangetown, New York. 15 months later. The freezing of bodies was to confuse investigators so they could not figure out the time of death of the frozen victims. By 1986, Kuklinski was heavily investigated and caught the attention of Pat Kane of the New York State Police. An undercover ATF agent, Dominic Polifron, went undercover 18 months prior to gather evidence to apprehend Kuklinski. He was connected to the then 5 unsolved murders, as he was the last person to see each of the victims alive. A joint investigation between the New Jersey District Attorney, the FBI, and ATF was launched, titled Operation Iceman. Kuklinski, enticed by his favorite method of killing through the use of cyanide, met with Polifron to obtain cyanide on another attempt on an undercover officer's life. Having recorded Kuklinski's boasting of using cyanide in previous murders, Polifron gave Kuklinski cyanide. Kuklinski was suspicious of the cyanide given to him when he gave a burger laced with the drug to a stray dog, and it did not have any effects that he was used to seeing. He decided not to go through with the murder and returned home. Two hours after meeting Polifron, Kuklinski got in his car to meet with Barbara as they were on their way to a medical appointment due to her illness. As they were on their way, Richard Kuklinski was caught and arrested by investigators of the case on a roadblock they set up. Because of his massive size, and emotionally outraged by how law enforcement officials were treating his wife, it took several officers to take him down and place him under arrest. During the trial, William Carey Edwards, the New Jersey State Attorney, described the motive for Kuklinski's murders as profit, and further elaborated, he set individuals up for business deals, they disappeared, and the money ended up in his hands. Former associates, some of whom he planned to kill, provided evidence against him. In March 1988, Kuklinski was found guilty of 5 murders. It was determined that the murders were not of his conduct, so he was able to escape the death penalty. He was sentenced to 60 years in prison. Following the trial, Kuklinski pled guilty to killing 2 other individuals and was given 2 additional life sentences, served consecutively. He was incarcerated at Trenton State Prison. He would have been eligible for parole in 2046, when he would have been 110 years old. While incarcerated, Richard and Barbara divorced, with Barbara stating it was for money reasons. Richard was approached for numerous interviews of his life and crimes he committed. His story was even the subject to numerous HBO documentaries known as the Iceman tapes. In one of his last interviews, a psychiatrist conducting the interview believed Kuklinski suffered from antisocial personality disorder plus paranoid personality disorder. In many of his interviews, Kuklinski stated that he had killed over 100 men. In October 2005, Kuklinski was diagnosed with Kawasaki disease, a heart condition that caused the immune system to attack blood vessels. He was transferred to a secure wing in St. Francis Medical Center in Trenton, New Jersey. He asked doctors to make sure he was revived if he went into cardio arrest. However, Barbara had signed a do not resuscitate order. A week before his death, the hospital called Barbara to ask if she wished to rescind the instruction. She declined. On the 5th of March, 2006, Kuklinski died at the age of 70. Foul play was suspected in his passing as he was supposed to testify against a former mobster who was being tried for murder. An autopsy was performed, but was determined that he died due to natural causes. Thank you for watching this video. Learning that Stone Cold Steve Austin's character was inspired by Richard Kuklinski was something that piqued my interest. I always wondered who this person was that inspired the professional wrestler that many people from my generation looked up to and admired. I got my answer through hours of research and watching documentaries that told the story of his life. I must say that he was a truly disturbed individual with a traumatic past. Despite his troubled past, that does not clear him of his wrongdoings. This also goes to show that a person's future is shaped by their past. Monsters are not born, they are created and taught through repetitive violent behavior. As for Richard, we can really only wonder what life would have been if he was raised in a better environment. I hope you took something from this video and possibly learned to appreciate your loved ones a lot more, because they can be taken away from us because of people like Richard. Other than that, thank you for watching. Take care of yourselves, make good decisions, and have a wonderful rest of your day.